Well, it looks like FedEx has dropped off a customer's amp here for repair. I believe this is going to be a 1965 Fender Bandmaster. So let's drag it inside, get Jack to do some sniffing, and see what we've got. Well, it looks like a massive box has been delivered here to the Uncle Doug and Jack residence. There was an outer box, and then an inner box, and then more packing. So let's get Jack to do some sniffing out here before we continue. Okay, we have to have Jack perform his infamous scan before we can continue to unpack. If it doesn't pass, we'll just seal the box and return it. What do you think, Jackie? He's checking the outside first for signs of explosive residue. Okay, now a very careful entry for some close-up sniffing. First, we stop and chew on some tape. Ignore the tape, Jack. Get to work. Okay, now we're getting down to it. Getting inside this box. Gonna taste it. Oh, maybe a little tape. What do you think, Jack? I've never seen so much sniffing. We get a yay or nay on this. Well, we're getting some heavy-duty sniffing here. And I'm going to take that as a positive sign, Jack. So let's go ahead and finish opening this and see what's inside. Well, it looks like we've got a whole bunch of parts here. We've got knobs, potentiometers, tube shields, and some tubes under here. I'm going to guess this is a brand new control panel inside this very well packed container. I think it's down in there, that kind of blade edge. And here's that brand new control panel for the Fender Bandmaster. Looks really nice. I wonder if there's one for the rear panel though. Well, it looks like we have a Fender amplifier chassis here. All the original filter caps. I'm not sure where the little doghouse lid is. I'll have to look through the box. A shiny chassis. Good Lord. Transformers look original. Massive output transformer. Original two-prong plug. So far so good. Well, Jack now is getting a nice look at the inside of the chassis, and I am really astounded. It looks totally unmolested. Perfect original condition. All the original caps are in place. Shiny, clean. You can see why it needs a control panel since there isn't one on it. The original two-prong power cord. So it looks like this ought to be a pretty neat job. Okay, so let's drag this out in the workshop and start analyzing the circuit. Jack is checking out the circuit right now. This will help me when it comes time to analyze it. He'll be able to point out all the faulty components. Good cat. You finished your analysis, Jack? So Jackie, are you ready? You're going to help me carry this out to the workshop? What a helpful little pussycat. Okay, we've got this jewel out on the workbench. Let's take a real slow scan of the entire circuit. All original caps, the double Mallory 25 microfarad cathode bypass caps, another double, and a single, probably tremolo capacitors. Let's see, everything looks, oh yeah, original bias supply capacitor and diode, which will have to be carefully checked. It's got the brass grounding plate. God, everything is just pristine and immaculate. It's like it's been dipped in some sort of metal plating. Really nice. Okay, I'm used to seeing them be sort of that kind of a yellowish, dull metal, and this is very much looks like nickel plate. Okay. Let's take a look at the top of the chassis. Okay, we've got corrosion here, but it's not really all that bad for the age of this amp. Also, you notice on this is two 6L6 output tubes, and they use the same chassis for models that had 4, and they just covered the holes for the other pair of output tubes. I have to check the part numbers, but I'll bet you any amount that these are completely original. Transformers. And of course this will be among the first things to be replaced. Okay, so that's our preliminary scan. It's time to make a list and order parts so that we can get this jewel back into really nice original condition and operating, if anything, better than new. And there's the serial number for the chassis. I'll have to look this up on the internet, but it's probably like 65, 66. Well, the parts finally arrived for the customer's Bandmaster. I had to go to a place called Parts Express to get the two 70 microfarad at 350 volt caps that are always in series as the reservoir caps for the larger Fender amp circuit. I looked everywhere for these and couldn't find them except for this fine place, and I'm glad that I have made that discovery. With those two capacitors came catalogs, coupons, and this lovely young lady even sent me a stainless steel universal tool here that can do everything from clipping your toenails to tuning your car. And here is even a little diagram to show you what each of those little sections of it do. So these guys are first class, and if you need a part they have, I would recommend them. And next came my much larger shipment from Antique Electronic Supply, a full tube set for the Bandmaster. The owner of the amp wanted to have all the tubes replaced with new ones. And then the big filter capacitors. I went with the JJs rather than Sprague Adams. We went kind of with a middle of the road price filter cap, and I have a feeling these are dandies. And then the cathode bypass caps and other caps that I'm going to need. And let's see, here in the bottom are the rest of the tubes, if I can get them out. A matched set of 6L6 GCs. So I look forward to installing all of these parts and getting the customer's amp up and running as good or maybe even a little bit better than new. Looks like it's time to remove all the old electrolytic capacitors and replace them with new ones. All of the 20s and one of the 70s is positive at the top, but since these are wired in series, the last one is rotated so it's tail to head. This would be negative, this would be positive. Okay, all the new filter caps are soldered securely in place to the brass eyelets. I like to get them just in a perfect line, exactly the same space, everything. But this darn ruby cap came with a real short lead, okay, which kind of upset me. And they're kind of odd capacitors. Most caps have a dent at the positive end, or they'll have a plus at the positive end. The rubies have dents at both ends. They have pluses at both ends. But what you have to go by is the arrow with the minus in it pointing down here. So this is the negative end going down on this one, remember, and going this way on the last one. Once the filter caps have all been replaced, it's time to flip the chassis over and let's go in and replace these ancient cathode bypass caps. It always amazes me when a great big fat old 25-25 cap like this can be replaced by two tiny little caps, and both of these have double the voltage rating of the original. Let's review the components that have been replaced at this point. We have the 320 at 550 electrolytic capacitors, the two 70 at 350 electrolytics that are always wired in series. Here are the cathode bypass caps for the preamp tubes and phase inverter. Here is the filter cap for the negative DC bias supply. Also, we'll see that two of the coupling caps for the 6L6s were leaky and had to be replaced. Here are the screen grid resistors for the 6L6s, which are kind of burned up as they usually are, and here are the grid stopper resistors. It's always a good idea to change these. Don't bother testing them, just change them, because they really are subjected to a lot of heat and they're almost always out of. Alright, here is the finished circuit. It looks almost empty without those big bulky old-fashioned electrolytic capacitors. We see here the two replaced coupling caps for the 6L6s, and also resistors that were way out of spec have been replaced. Up here we see that the screen grid resistors and the grid stoppers for the 6L6s are brand new. Down here is our negative DC bias supply, and we see that the new electrolytic filter cap is happily in place. All 7 of the diodes were tested and found to be in perfect working order. Now it's time to change this old 2-wire power cord to a modern 3-wire chassis grounding power cord. You see that it comes in here and the white goes to one side of that auxiliary receptacle at the rear of the chassis, and the black wire goes to the other side. Okay, that's all acceptable, but then it continues down here to a polarity reversal switch and a death capacitor. Okay, now we don't need the polarity reversal and we don't need the death capacitor, so we're going to bypass that and come down here with one of the wires, the black wire, run it through the fuse, the switch, and then to the primary winding of the power transformer. The other wire from the primary winding will go directly to the white wire that's coming in on the power cord. Okay, I removed the old power cord, and see how kinked it was there. I don't think Ray Davies would approve of that. Also that, got the strain relief off of it, and I removed all of those yellow fabric covered wires. Now, you see I've connected one of the 2 primary wires from the transformer over here to this side of the auxiliary receptacle, and that's where the white wire from the power cord is going to go. Then the black wire is going to go here and then come over here and go through the switch, the fuse, and then to the other black primary wire. Here's the new power cord with the ground wire bolted down to the chassis. The white wire right here is going directly into the power transformer, primary. The black wire rides up above here, goes to the power switch, through the fuse, and then to the other side of the primary winding of the power transformer. The nice thing about this is that the polarity switch and the so-called death capacitor are left completely in place as they were. No original parts in have been removed, and the chassis is essentially stock. It's just been rewired to modern standards. And for those of you who would like to build your own amps, let me show you a really nice example of the correct way to wire your filament heaters, and that is tightly twisted wire that rides up above and then swoops down into the socket to make connections. The other one rises up, comes across here, and swoops down. You do not run the wires down around on the chassis or wrapping around the tube socket. This is the proper way to do it to eliminate any chance of hum. Well, this is a job I've never had to do before, and that is to replace the entire control panel plate on a Fender amp, in this case the Bandmaster. I've had to remove every single nut and screw from all of the controls. And now let's hope that this new plate, once I peel off that protective plastic, will fit properly up here on this faceplate. Well, happy day. It does fit just perfectly. Looks like $1,000,000 too. So now I have to go ahead and reassemble the whole control panel. Also, while I was at it, the two tremolo pots were absolutely frozen. I mean, even with pliers you can't get that shaft to turn. So I had to replace them with two brand new pots. They're of unusual value and they are reverse logarithmic pots, so you have to order the exact right ones if you want your tremolo to work properly. That plate, I think, looks like $1,000,000. Also, I have a nice set of new knobs to install on it. Now, as a reward for all my hard work, the bright switch has decided to quit working. It goes about halfway up and stops. It's jammed. So now I have to remove it and unwire it, take it out and see if I can fix it. If not, I'll have to order a replacement. Well, here's that slide switch. It's a Carling, and it has the Underwriter Laboratory approval, so you know it's going to be good. But look at these contacts, they're flapping in the breeze. That can't be right. So I'm going to unprong it here and open this beast up and see what's going on. Okay, I've got it apart, and sure enough, these things are just flopping around here, and what they're doing, they can slide inward like that, and they block the passage of that sliding contact. So I'm going to have to bend them really tight against this cardboard to hold them steady and out of the way of the slider. Well, this is just non-stop fun. It looks like the little wraparound flange that comes around up here and holds this in place has broken off. It also looks like the original plan was to drill a hole here to weaken it so that it was very likely for that to happen. Now, I've never had one of these fail before, but this amp is finding new ways to torture me. So I guess I'll either have to make another pair of these or find some way to fix these. Well, there's no fixing the old ones. They're real brittle, and when you try to bend them, they just break. So I cut off some narrow strips of fairly heavy gauge brass here, and I'm going to make some new ones. Okay, here's the piece with the two little brass strips in place and bent into shape. Now I have to solder the wires on either side after I install this back in the sliding switch. I have a feeling this is going to work just fine. If you're asking why didn't I just order a replacement, it's because I can't stand to wait to get parts. Okay, here's the switch back together. Let's see if it works. Looks good to me. Let's see how the chassis looks with its new control panel, new knobs, repaired bright switch. Look at that, just like new. Really pretty. Well, let's see what other horrors this amp has in store for me. What other petty annoyance can this amp throw at me? Well, how about a fuse holder and cap that don't work together in any way, okay, which necessitates the replacement of the fuse holder with one that actually has a cap that works. Then the ultimate indignity. After all the new capacitors were installed, two new pots, pilot light, fuse holder, bright switch, front panel, knobs, new tube set. Guess what? This thing is stone dead. So let's figure out why. The first thing that comes to mind when an amp is absolutely dead quiet, you don't even really get a power hum out of the speaker, and you know the speaker's good, is the output transformer. Now, I've already checked the plate current for both of the output tubes. I did that before I left two new tubes in to be harmed, and they were within reasonable limits. So the primary side of the output transformer seems to be okay. But the secondary side of this fat, expensive beast that lurks under here is suspect. So let's check it. I removed the two output transformer secondary wires from the speaker output jacks, hooked my ohm meter probes to each of them, and if we had an open winding, you would see that it had infinite resistance, but instead it is very, very close to zero resistance between them. Now, is that simply because that secondary winding has almost no DC resistance? Well, there's only one other way to check, and that is to do a winding ratio test on the output transformer. Now, to do this test, we're going to run from our trusty variac, which is at 0 volts and off position, and connect over here for some AC input to the two primary winding leads of the output transformer. So we're going to crank up some voltage here and then check for output voltage from the secondary leads and see what the ratio is between input and output voltage. If you have any uncertainties about what I'm doing, just check my video on output transformers and you will see step by step how to do this procedure. Okay, we'll flip on the variac and watch our output voltage as I crank up a little bit of input voltage, and lo and behold, look at what's happening. There's nothing wrong with that output transformer. Okay, well, I don't know exactly why it's not putting anything out to my speaker, but there's nothing wrong with that secondary winding. Okay, now I'm checking the bias voltage, the positive DC being applied to the grids of both of the 606 output tubes. Here's the right-hand tube. We see 37.7 volts negative being applied, which sounds fine. Now let's switch the probe over to the left-hand tube. Okay, let's switch over here from our nice stable 37 volts to the left-hand bias resistor for the tube where the bias was jumping all over the place. And it's not jumping around, but it certainly is low. That's crazy. It should be 37 also. Those resistors are the exact same value. So let's replace this left-hand resistor and see if we can't get an equal bias voltage to our two tubes, at least a stable one. Okay, I replaced that suspicious resistor, and because another cause of irregular bias on the grid can be the coupling capacitors, I replaced both of them. Now I have a rock solid bias voltage on both grids. Now another problem has come to light. Notice this wire, 430 volts, comes up here to those two resistors for the long tail pair plates. One is 82K and the other is 100K. After the 82K we want 230 volts. After the 100K we want 225 volts. Wait till you see what we have. Okay, right here we're at the 425 or 30 volt intersection. Now here's the 100K resistor, and we expect to see what, about 225 volts up here, and we expect to see about 230 volts up here. This is the 82K. Okay, let's see what we actually have after each resistor. After the 82K, how about 425 volts? In other words, no resistance whatsoever. Now let's test its resistance. It reads 94K. Alright, that's what, 12,000 ohms high? So you'd expect, if anything, the voltage after it to be lower. Instead, even though it gives a high reading for a DC ohm meter, it has absolutely no resistance when faced with 425 volts of DC. To me, this is a really good example of why you can't trust a DC ohm meter to test resistors and think they're going to work in a circuit that has 425 volts. Well, let's change out this lying little stinker here and see what we get. Well, hallelujah, we got 250 volts on each of those resistor outputs and to the plates of the phase inverter, and that lovely sound you hear is the 300 cycle tone being amplified. I have the tremolo on though, and of course it's not going to work, even though we see the little lightning bug flashing his tail in there. I don't hear any sort of tremolo modulation, so of course there'll be more to fix. But anyway, I really feel good. The amp is amping. So now it's time to address the tremolo problem. And yes, I have grounded the tremolo oscillation loop so that it will operate. And I've connected a ohmmeter probe to my Simpson 260 here to where the varying output of the varying resistance that should result from that photo isolator unit should be evident right here. You can hear a slight thumping, okay, but I would expect the ohmmeter needle to be wiggling a bit to reflect that varying resistance, and I don't see it. Now we know the oscillator circuit is working because we can see the little lightning bug flashing there in its little black burrito housing, and therefore I'm wondering about that photoresistor, if it has failed. Okay, these upper two wires up here are for the neon bulb to flash, and we can see it flashing just fine. The lower two wires are for the photoresistor that's inside the little knapsack there, and one is ground and one is the varying resistance. And let's look over here. We've hooked the probes up, and the resistance hops around a little bit, but you would expect it to be making some much greater changes, even though the meter might have a hard time keeping up with it. That's why I use the analog meter. I'm not seeing a whole lot of variation. So now I guess we have no choice but to extract the little opto-isolator unit, remove the photoresistor, and see what if its resistance changes when it's in the dark or when bright light is shined on it. Well, the exterminator came and successfully removed the roach from the eyelet board. I've hooked on the probes for my ohmmeter, and sure enough, that photoresistor is open. Okay, so it has failed. Let's dissect the roach and remove that photoresistor, and I guess we'll have to order. Well, it's been a while since I dissected anything. I guess back my days teaching biology. But here we can open up that sheath and extract the two parts, the little neon bulb and the apparently failed photoresistor. Well, the Fender replacement photoresistor unit showed up in the mailbox today, so I installed it. I will bet you some people have installed these things backwards because it would be easy to do, but the resistor end is toward the knobs and the neon bulb end is toward the rear of the chassis. Now another problem has arisen with the trusty Bandmaster. The central or wiper contact on the volume control, if you touch it, will pop loudly and start whistling and making all sorts of noises. I have no idea why. It seems loose, so I replaced it with a brand new 1 meg pot. Then after all the changes, I powered up the amp and started to test it, and all of a sudden the current limiter started glowing brightly. I heard some popping and motor boating and had to shut it off real quick to avoid any harm. I thought that perhaps one of the new filter caps was failing and giving that motor boating effect, but no, they all seem to be just fine. So I thought I'd run some tests without the tubes in place. I pulled out this tube and was able to touch it with my hand. This tube was at about 400 degrees, okay, just red hot. And I began to wonder, well, could it possibly have some sort of short or be some reason to be drawing so much? Now bear in mind, this is a brand new matched pair JJ tube. Watch down here at my short indicator when I get to position 2. Dead short inside this tube on position 2. Let's use the ohm meter to see exactly what is shorted within the tube. Welcome to the world of madness. I pulled out the tube, checked for improper continuity between pins. No, the only 2 pins that have continuity are the filament pins, which is what you'd normally expect. Put it back into the tube tester to double check for shorts at position 2, and there aren't any. You saw it a minute ago, there was a definite dead short in position 2. Now there isn't one, which means that if there is a short in the tube, it must be an intermittent one, which puts me in a lousy position because if I send this back for a refund or replacement, they're going to test it and think I'm crazy. If I put it in the amp and send it back to the customer, you know darn well that it's going to arrive shorted and just burn the whole thing up and probably burn his house down. It's kind of a lose-lose situation for me. I may end up having to eat a bad tube, and that's not a meal I particularly relish. So about my only recourse is to put this back into the amp, operate it at full voltage with the circuit protected with the current limiter, and see if the short reappears. Okay, I've got it plugged in, I've got the tubes in place, the questionable tube is over here. I've set the probes up to measure the voltage drop across the output transformer winding that goes to that bad tube, and we've got the current limiter back here, and you'll be able to read the voltage drop which indicates the current flow to the tube. Okay, here we go. You heard it come on. A little bit of a power hum. It is connected to a speaker, of course, so you'll be able to hear what's going on. So far so good. Now it may only be that the short exists when the tube's hot. The voltage drop seems stable. Okay, we've been running here for several minutes. No glow, stable voltage drop. I'm injecting now a fairly low frequency signal, and I thought it'd be nice to test that new tremolo photoresistor unit. Which seems to work perfectly. There's intensity, speed, so that's working well. The new volume control now is smooth and quiet. And so it would appear the amp is fixed, but I can't shake the memory of what that tube was doing just a few minutes ago. Using the trusty infrared heat gun, both tubes are about the same temperature and they're plenty hot, 258 degrees, but so far no problems. Okay, we're going on here probably close to 20 minutes, and with the signal input, reasonably stable plate current, no glow. It looks like the tube has resurrected itself. Okay, about 30 minutes have passed without any issues. It seems like it's running perfectly. One might say then that the amp is finished and ready to go home, but I still can't get over what was happening with that tube and that intermittent short. I really can't in good conscience send this back this way, even though it passed the test. I'm going to contact the vendor and see what they say about maybe exchanging this set of tubes for a brand new set. Well, I'm very glad to report that Antique Electronics Supply, the classy place that they are, backed up their product 100%. I returned the defective tube set and they sent me a brand new matched pair of 6L6 GCs for replacement. They arrived today. I've just unpacked them. I'm going to put them in the amp, rebias it, and then we're going to see how it sounds. Okay, now we'll see how Jack and Ollie can do with the 1965 Fender Bandmaster. We'll start off on the vibrato channel. We'll play it clean, and then we'll try a little of that new tremolo speed and intensity. Now let's try a little tremolo. I'll crank it up and change the speed and intensity while Ollie and Jack are playing. Now for all you tremolo hogs out there, we'll go to 10 on intensity, so get a good grip on your beer. Now we'll switch over to the normal channel with the same bass and treble settings. I think you're going to be really impressed by the increase in gain and the fullness of tone, and I'm going to keep the volume at the same level that it was when we tried the vibrato channel. Well, I guess that's about it for this rather lengthy video on the Bandmaster from hell. It's not its fault, I know that. This poor old amp has probably been to hell and maybe halfway back, and it really needed a tune-up, as you saw, and a bunch of replacement parts, but I really think it's back to being just about as good as new. Any video like this where all sorts of problems pop up is great for learning purposes. And I hope that all you novice amp repair people saw some things that were new or interesting and will help you in your own pursuits. Thanks again to all the Patreon patrons and PayPal contributors whose generosity has kept us on the air all this time, advertising free. To any of you who would like to join them and supporting our channel, I would really appreciate it, and you can check the video description for links that will help you do so. So while you all are taking a musical drone flight, I'll be packing up this chassis to send back to the proud owner. So thanks so much for your time and interest, and I'll see you again in our next video. Bye for now.